Hello everyone and welcome back. In the past episodes, we looked at how to generate a Metasploit payload, analyze it, and also how to make it stealthier and even bypass Defender antivirus. In this part, we'll go a step further and disguise the payload as a legitimate document file. Our goal will be to create a payload that, when launched, will present a document file, and behind the scenes it will execute some payload without triggering any suspicion for the user. To do that, we need a couple of things. Obviously, first, we need the payload that we want to execute, same as before. Then, we need a decoy document file. In this case, let's use a PDF file, this one over here. And then we need a way to bind these two together and execute them. For this, I have two programs. The first one will dump two files on the disk in the temporary folder. It will dump an executable and the decoy document, and in the end, start both of them. The executable without a visible window using swhide, and the decoy document will be displayed normally. One important thing about this file is that it will read itself and scan for markers delimiting the payloads inside it. It will scan from the beginning of the document until it will find the specific separator. After the separator, it will read the first embedded file, which is the payload, and dump it. Then again, it will find another separator, then read and dump the second embedded file, which is the decoy. Write both of them to disk and execute them. So far, so good. We now need a simple way to append these two files at the end of the executable. And we do that using a second small program which will receive as arguments the two documents, payload and decoy, plus a final executable. Its logic is simple. Take a few minutes to look at it. Basically, what I'm doing here is I will copy the file generated before by this program. I will copy that one to a new file, let's say final.exe, but it can be anything. I'm copying this to a new file, and then append at the end a separator, followed by the payload, followed by another separator, followed by the decoy. One last thing to mention is if we want the final file to be as stealthy as possible, we also want to change its icon. And we'll do this using a resource file. RES resource files are generated from RC files. An RC file contains the path to an icon file, in our case a simple PDF style icon. And it's generated using the RC tool. To be able to run the RC tool, we also need the Visual Studio development environment variables loaded. Run this command, and then we will have a binary file representing the resource, the icon. Okay. After we have this one, we need to generate the executable that will dump and run the two, Decoy and Payload. Very simple. Let's see. Don't worry about the warnings. Everything is fine. Notice now we have this executable, openall.exe, which has a PDF icon. After that, we need to append to it the marker and embed the other two files. We'll do that using bind.cpp and bind.exe. Let's compile it first. We specify first the payload, which is bypass defender, then there is the decoy document, and then the final file. If we check the final file, its size includes the openall binary size, 344, plus the payload, 446, plus the decoy document, which is 599 almost, with the marker. We have the final file over here, which is ready to be sent to the victim. Let's even rename it as guitar solo. Notice that by default, Windows doesn't display the extension for PDF files. So it would appear very stealthy and don't raise suspicions. Before launching it, let's start FakeNet again to make sure that the payload is successful and that it generates the expected request. Let's see what happens. Notice that we have the PDF file, we can navigate through the file, everything looks okay. But behind the scenes, we've seen pretty quickly that a request to download the next stage is made. This is the binary that executed successfully. And if we go into the TMP folder, we should see two new files. The decoy PDF file and the second one, which is exactly this one. Over here, the payload. And notice on the desktop, this is the file that has been downloaded and this one was served by FakeNet. We don't need these ones anymore, we can safely delete them. Alright. To recap, in this part, we've seen a very interesting idea that can be used to produce a file that can easily fool even advanced users. We packed together a decoy with a binary and executed the payload stealthily. Although in this case the binding method was rather simple, it could be refined. Things like removing debug information, encrypting the payload, adding delays and adding AV evasion would go a long way. This would be very useful on a red team engagement. And it's just the starting point, and there are lots of things that can go on from here. The lesson for the defense teams is that we always need to be aware of what we're executing. Even something that looks like an innocuous document can be a Trojan horse that hides an army of attacks. Also, it goes almost without saying that applications should not be allowed as email attachments. Even though fake icons for executables are more difficult to detect, things like double extension and fake metadata can be detected. Thank you very much for your time and see you in the next videos. Take care!